gotta get started, or we'll never get finished. And we're not finishing. Mark, we're in Mark chapter 14. I found it interesting when I started going through this class, this week, trying to get everything together. I had to go back into John, I had to go back into Luke, I had to go back into Matthew, compare scriptures and what to look for. What amazed me was, you all know what today is. What is today in church?
Sunday.
Sunday. It's Sunday. That's the younger generation out there. Today is Family Day at church. And what do we do on Family Day at church? Take communion. And guess what? We're getting into that. We're going to lead into that today in this class. Because a lot of people, including myself, have always taken communion lightly. And communion is not a light subject. It is not something to be taken lightly. Paul actually tells us in the Corinthians that we should not take it if we're not ready, that we should hold back. And I have known people, many people, that during their Christianity time, they decided to decline taking communion because they wanted to sacrifice. That's because their souls were not perfect at that particular moment. Now, it takes a big person to do that, I will tell you. Anyway, last week we ended up with Judas, and I ran across a few things I wanted to just mention briefly about Judas. Sometimes we are critical of him, which we should be, but we also need to understand where he came from. All the apostles but Judas came from the north, from Galilee. Think about this. Of all the 12, he was the only one that didn't come from Galilee. He came from a town called Kerioth, down south of Jerusalem and east of the Dead Sea. So he lived in a completely different environment, a completely different land, completely different time and situation than the rest of them did. That did not excuse him. And when people tell me that, well, your social upbringing is probably your problem. Your social upbringing may be a concern in your past, but it is not your problem. All of us were raised in different social backgrounds, different places. Some of us were dirt poor, others were poor, and some were just a little step ahead of us, but most of us were raised in a society where we treated people with respect, elders with respect. You wouldn't beat on a woman for any reason whatsoever. So, and he came from a different society, but the thing is, Judas was a little different than the others because he had a different purpose. And we're going to cover that when we get into this lesson today about why did God choose Judas in the first place. So here we go. There's Oswald Chambers. He was a preacher back he was born in 1874 and he died in 1917. He's only 43 years old. He wrote some very important literature, but he made a comment that I picked up on this week and I want to add it to this. When we talk about heaven, we talk about Christ, we talk about the cross, he put it this way: all of heaven is interested in the cross of Christ. All hell terribly is afraid of the cross of Christ. While men are the only beings who more or less ignore its meaning. That's strong.
Yeah.
That is strong. Because many times we do ignore its meaning. So anyway, that's just something I found I wanted to get to you. All right, let's go to chapter 14, verse 12. Now on the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover lamb, his disciples said to him, "Where do you want us to go?" It's verse 12. "Where do you want us to go and prepare that we may eat the Passover?" Basically, you may eat the Passover. Notice that, not we, you. Where do you want to eat the Passover, Lord? And he sent out two of his disciples and said to them, "Go into the city, and a man will meet you carrying a pitcher of water. Follow him wherever he goes. Go in, say to the master of the house, the teacher says, 'Where is the guest room in which I may eat the Passover with my disciples?' Then he will show you a large upper room furnished and prepared. There make ready for us." We've talked about this in John, and we've talked a little bit in Luke. But what we're talking about today is preparing for the Passover, and as Jesus and his disciples stepped into the last days of his life. Now, there was a question that came to a lot of people's minds. Jesus ate the Passover meal on the 14th day, and the Passover is on the 15th day. It starts the unleavened bread. I had to do a little research on that to find out what the difference was. Did Jesus eat it early, or did they eat it late? No. The northern Jews that Jesus came from used the daytime. They used sunrise to sunset as their sunrise to sunrise as their day. The ones in the south used the sunset to sunset, so they had an overlap of time there. So don't get confused and think that he did it out of time. So Jesus sent Peter and John. That's who the disciples were. Sent them into town. Said, "Okay, fellows, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to town. I want you to watch for a man who's carrying a bottle of water, a jar of water." Now, the reason he's looking for a man is because women do that job. That's a woman's job. Just like, the men sat around and talked about everything that was going on in the world. You guys that go meet every morning at a particular restaurant, that's sometimes what you do. But this was a way for God to acknowledge where he's going to eat the dinner. So Peter and John go into town, they look and they find this man carrying a vase of water around in the city, and they follow him to where he's going. A question you might ask is, why is Jesus so clandestine about why he's sending it in this way? Why don't just march into town, talk to this guy himself, and get it done? Well, what would you do if you had people looking for you all over the city and all over the country trying to kill you? What would you do? The disciples were less known than he is, so Peter and John, they went into town, into Jerusalem, out of Bethany. They were in Bethany at the time. They walked that 2-mile stretch over there. They went into town. They found this man with the water, and they followed him to a house. Now, I've read people that say, well, maybe it was Nicodemus's house. Maybe it was Joseph's or Arimathea. Whoever it was, he was a fairly wealthy person because he had a very large upper room. So a lot of people believe it's different aristocrats and all that, and most people believe that he was probably a hidden Christian. Because when they went in and they followed him up and they talked to him, the man that owned the house, the good houseman, that's what he called him, when they asked him the question and told him this, said the teacher or the master, is a word used in Greek, the master would like to eat the Passover in your house. We want to eat here. And the guy took him upstairs, showed him a room in the loft that was big enough for them to have their Passover feast. Now the thing was, it was furnished and set up already for the Passover feast. I find this interesting. I don't know if you got what you think about things being foreordained or things being predestinated, but I find it interesting that Jesus Christ, who knows all, sees all, is all, and creates all, I kind of find it interesting that he knew from the get-go that this man is going to lead him to the place that he's going to have the Last Supper, where he's going to eat his Seder meal with his disciples for the last time in the physical body. What they don't understand, Peter and John, is this is the last opportunity they're going to sit down to eat with Jesus in his lifetime, physical lifetime. And so they find the man, they ask him what it is, and so they find this, and they set it up. I also like the fact that he says, and they prepared, so in 16, I'll read that too. So his disciples went out, came into the city, and found it just as he had said to them, and they prepared the Passover. Now, I used to think the guy did it. The guy. You know the guy?
You gotta have the room.
You gotta have a room. Well, he didn't do it. Peter and John prepared the Passover meal for Jesus. They had to go to the market and buy a spotless lamb. They had to take it to be slaughtered, to be cut, to drain its blood. And they flayed it for him. They cut it in pieces for him. They took it back to the place that they were staying, and they roasted the lamb. They're going to do this all in one day. You guys that know how to cook, I don't know if what they used for a stove back in the day. I kind of look at it as a smoker or a brick oven like the people have here. But they did all of this work, and they set up all the things that's needed inside of this room for the Passover meal to take place. They got the wine glasses already, they got the matzah bread already, and there's 3 different types of matzah bread that they use in the Passover feast. They got everything prepared, and so they went back and found Jesus, told him that it's ready, and they all 12 came into the Passover dinner. Now, the Passover to the Jew was the thing to look forward to from year to year. They celebrated and they worshiped all at the same time. Now I'm going to cover a little bit of the stuff that takes place in the Passover, because when we get into the Lord's Supper today, I want you to understand where that aligns with what it says in the Old Testament and the New Testament about the Passover. They started a Passover meal with 4 glasses of wine. Now, or juice, wine, okay, it's wine because it keeps you from getting all kinds of sicknesses and all that kind of thing. They start out with 4 of them. The first one is called the Kiddush. It's the first cup is used for the Kiddush. They use that to sanctify the service and get the thing ready. It's to open up. They have a prayer service over the Passover meal so people can understand. What happens when they get there is every Passover has a host. Every Passover has a host. Generally, it's the father. And the children, one of the youngest children, will ask 4 questions. They will ask, Father, why do we do this like we do? I'll see if I can find my questions. I want you to hear. What makes this night different from all other nights? They ask that question. So the father starts relating to them what's happened. Why do we do this? Then he says, on this night we eat only bitter herbs, and other nights all kinds of vegetables. Why is that? And so the father gets into the details of why they do this on Passover and no other night. And then he says, on most nights we don't dip at all. We don't dip our bread or our matzah bread, our bread into the mix. But tonight we dip it twice. Why is that? And so he explains all of these things to them so they'll understand. And the last question, on this night we completely recline to eat. Why? Now, there's a lot of important things here. Number one, when they start the meal, Jesus is the host of the Passover meal. He's in charge. We talked about this in John. Those of you with us in John, who painted the Last Supper? Michelangelo. Did you think he had any idea what the Last Supper looked like? No. It looked like a photograph to me. I don't know. But I always heard the story that the same guy he used for Jesus ended up being Judas in the same picture years later. That's what I always heard. Don't know the truth. But in the case of the way it's set, Michelangelo has 12 guys laying around a table waiting for their picture to be taken. In this particular case, when Jesus and the apostles came, and we covered this in John, you would have Jesus here at the head of the table, and over on the right is John, because John recorded it, that he sat on the right hand of Jesus. He was over on his side. On the left side is the place of honor. This is where you put the person that you're honoring for the feast. Who was it? Judas. It was Judas. Judas. Over here you have 5 guys. That's 4. And over here on the same side you have 5 more. That way they can see and hear everything that's going on. Inside is where the services would come. They do not sit there. In a regular service, in a regular meal, they would sit or lean a little bit. In this particular case, during the Passover, when they asked the question, why do we recline and not sit? What you would do is they say, look at a corpse. How a corpse is. You lay it on your stomach or on your side, and your feet extended out here, all the way down. You had your head on that pillow. This is where you ate. This is the way you ate. When you were regularly there, you would lay back, or you would recline forward, or you would sit and you would eat. This way, they've done it different. I don't really know why they did it that way in the Old Testament. I couldn't find out why. I can tell you why they did it in the New Testament. It's because Jesus came by and washed the feet of every one of his apostles. They didn't have to get up. All they had to do is let him wash the feet.